Matthew Stafford pretty much was on a path for career numbers last season, and then he got split in half like freaking, origami. So
Yeah.
what's that
Matthew
looking like?
Stafford. Yeah, he had this is the second year in a row. I'm a little concerned about him just because he's had 2 years in a row where he's had vertebral fractures. The first year, it's like, okay, that happens. You fracture part of your back. It occurs. It's not uncommon necessarily. At the
It
same
sounds
time,
painful. Is that just me?
oh,
Like
dude, super
it's
painful.
it
No,
He
sounds
it's
had
like
to
super
it's
fight
painful.
through it too,
that's what I'm
right? He's a
saying.
pretty
Like,
Yeah,
tough guy.
and you can't do anything about it either. And like one of the things to consider too is like, I know this is like sort of off topic, but
yeah.
like from a biological evolutionary standpoint, like we haven't, as humans, we haven't been upright in a long time. For a long time, I guess I should say, like relatively speaking, right? Like we're still sort of evolving and adapting to having like an upright torso and spine and stuff like that. And so that's why everybody has back pain. I mean, it's just a part of life. But it's specifically, especially when you get injured, your body sort of freaks out and doesn't know what to do and wants to stabilize, right? Our brain's job wants to stabilize everything. So when you get these fractures, your brain can, and it doesn't happen to everybody, but potentially your brain will send signals to your muscles telling your back muscles to spasm. Because a spasm, what it does and what your brain interprets a spasm as is like, oh, we're going to give this portion of our body stability. We need to stabilize this portion of the body with the muscles because the bones need to heal. It needs to be painful because then that's going to slow this human down and make them sit so that they don't continue to cause potential, more damage. It's a whole cascade of events. And like,
Sure.
it's so difficult. It's funny. Like I'm a physical therapist, right? So like, you think this would happen to me? I recently tweaked my back and I was like thinking to myself how debilitating this is, but I was still like walking around like at work and stuff. And I can't imagine playing an NFL game like with like my back pain, right? I mean, I'm not an NFL caliber athlete, but like I was walking around thinking like, man, how do these dudes do it? Because it can just be debilitating. And I didn't even have fractures necessarily. So all of that is to say, like 2 years in a row, 32 years old. I am a little nervous depending on where you're taking him. I'd be careful. I'm not necessarily an advocate for carrying two quarterbacks, but I wouldn't go it alone with just Matthew Stafford.
Where was the injury to his back? Is it upper back, lower back?
So it's a mid back, I think, is a thoracic, which is even more odd. It's like peculiar because usually you see those. I'm assuming if he had the most common, it's called a fracture of the pars interarticularis, which is the vertebral sort of arch towards the back of the spine where that fractures. If that's where it was, then that's like pretty common. But the fact that it was in the mid back was strange to me. It was a little interesting. So that's sort of where I'm at with Matthew Stafford, is that he could very easily fracture again. If he's had it 2 years in a row, he's more likely to have it.
Got it. Okay. So basically, in other words, like everyone's feeling pretty high on Matt Stafford again, just because of the numbers he put up last season. And rightfully so. I mean, he was having a fucking hell of a year. My question to you on this particular, on the Matt Stafford injury is it a scenario where he can hurt it just by throwing, or is it a scenario where he needs to get sacked awkwardly to hurt it again?
Yeah, good question. It's it's an
Again,
it's a good question.
Yeah, it's a football play, right? But I'm saying, but we get the point, right? Because it's like if he's that fragile where he throws it and he tweaks it in like badly, then all of a sudden it's like, damn, I don't even know if I want to pick him, because that could happen.
And there's something to be said about how he throws, right? And then how the anatomy. You're asking really good questions, by the way. So
Thanks,
the anatomy, and I don't know if you like looked into this or knew. I don't know how. Maybe it's all those packets you've been reading. So the way that the human body works, essentially, right? The spine. Every time you extend backwards, you're compressing the back of the vertebrae, right? And like that's not bad inherently. Like compressing, people hear the word compress, like, oh, that's bad. Like that's just the way the body moves.
Sure.
You're compressing it. But there is something to be said about constant shearing, boom, 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 compression, right? How many times is he? And if you think about the motion of throwing a football, right? He extends the arm back, he extends the back backwards, as you do. And like how much torque is he putting on his back? Like, is he that continuous repetitive torque? Is that what's affecting his bone's ability to stay upright, to not fracture? So could it happen when he's throwing? Yes. And could it happen when he gets sacked? Yes. So like, that's the point that I think you're trying to make, is like, it's overall just sort of more volatile than it would be for any other player.
Yeah, definitely. And like the other thing that concerns me is like, and again, if anybody listening has had back problems, I'm one of them. That shit comes out of nowhere. Like there's no rhyme or reason to
Mhm.
why you would get a back problem. It's usually if you're like sweeping up crumbs from the ground. It's like
Right.
stupid shit, like things that you
Mhm.
can't even imagine. So I guess the point I'm trying to make is that he can come into the season saying he feels fucking phenomenal and everyone's going to jump on the Matt Stafford hype train. But the reality is that the next day he could throw the ball fucking sideways and all of a sudden he's got that back problem again. So like,
Exactly. He doesn't have to. That's a good point. He doesn't have to fracture the back to get back pain again.